is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. It is early morning in Moscow in what could be decisive hours. Apparently 3 leaders of the anti-Gorbachev coup suddenly are out, and a short time ago, gunfire was heard around Boris Yeltsin's Parliament fortress. Correspondent Anthony Mason in Moscow begins our reports.
Dan, events are occurring very rapidly and very dramatically at this moment. We have reports now that 3 people have been killed and another 12 people injured in a late-night movement of Soviet troops on the streets here in Moscow. Now, events began about 2.5 hours ago after an 11 o'clock curfew ordered today. Armored personnel carriers began moving through the streets. You're seeing pictures now of APC setting up a blockade outside of the CBS office here. Now, just down the road from that, on what's called the Garden Ring Road here in Moscow, a main artery, about a mile from here, very near the U.S. Embassy, and only 5 blocks from the Russian Parliament building, another blockade was set up. APCs reportedly fired into the air. Eyewitnesses saw the firing, but we're told now that 3 people during that exchange appear to have been killed, another 12 injured, including 1 person who was reportedly run over by a tank. Now, Soviet tanks are now reportedly outside of the Russian Parliament building. All of this caps a day of rising tension around what has become the center of resistance against the coup. The barricades around the Russian Parliament building were reinforced today as rumors swept through Moscow that tanks were on their way to seize the headquarters of Boris Yeltsin's determined resistance to the communist coup. The White Office tower, known as Yeltsin's White House, was still guarded by half a dozen tanks, some 20 armored vehicles, and a small corps of troops loyal to the Russian president. At midday, Yeltsin himself emerged to use the one weapon his rivals cannot claim: massive popular support. A sprawling crowd, tens of thousands, heard Yeltsin pledge, "We will hold out here as long as we have to remove this junta from power and bring it to justice." The tension was visible as security men held bulletproof shields around Yeltsin to guard against any assassination attempt. On the White House balcony, former Foreign Minister Eduard Shevardnadze demanded to know, where is the president? Conflicting rumors had Mikhail Gorbachev either in Moscow or still under house arrest in the Crimea. Tanks continued to lurk on Moscow street corners, but in spite of the ban on rallies, troops made no move against protesters, acting for the moment more like tourist attractions. The independent radio station Echo Moscow, shut down by the KGB yesterday, went back on the air today, guarded by Yeltsin loyalists. But after urging Muscovites to defend the Parliament building, they were ordered off the air again. At the Parliament, people stockpiled Molotov cocktails, distributed gas masks, and stood guard, preparing for an attack. It's very serious, this policeman says, but we will defend ourselves. Inside the White House, deputies said the atmosphere was that of a civil war.
But I think they will lose because they don't have the people's support.
But once again, reports that 3 people have been killed tonight, another 12 injured, as Soviet troops have begun moving through the city. Joining me now on the telephone is CBS News' Tony Headley, who is in a telephone booth at the location outside the U.S. Embassy, only very near the Russian Parliament building where this apparently occurred. Tony, can you describe again for us what happened?
About 20 minutes ago, about 8 APC's armored personnel vehicles broke through a barricade in front of the U.S. Embassy and engaged in an underpass. At the exit of this underpass was another barricade made up of trolley buses. The crowd of about 600, which was standing around me, then ran and surrounded these APCs, which proceeded on to trying to force their way. In the course of those events, our CBS driver witnessed one man being shot, and several bystanders told me that they saw another man being crushed by an APC, and only minutes ago, out of that crowd that is still surrounding the APCs, an ambulance has come out.
Okay, Tony, thank you very much. Tony Headley on the streets in Moscow. Dan?
Thank you very much. Only 2 days into the coup, the hard-right communist group of 8 that carried out the ouster of Gorbachev is changing at the top, raising the question, is it coming apart? More on that from Jonathan Sanders in Moscow.
The solid face of the hardline committee that ousted Mikhail Gorbachev may be cracking. Two of its members who failed to appear at yesterday's press conference reportedly are out, victims like Gorbachev of sudden bad health. Soviet Prime Minister Valentin Pavlov and, according to some reports, Defense Minister Dmitry Yazov have left the coalition of traditionalists who seized power on Monday. But whatever is behind their departure, what drew these men together is clear. The institutions they represent, central authority, and the Soviet Union's vast military-industrial complex are under siege. Changes unleashed by Gorbachev and pushed faster by radicals such as Boris Yeltsin are sweeping away the secure life they and their comrades enjoyed. Their interests may be best symbolized in the person of acting President Gennady Yanayev. When this career communist was elected as Gorbachev's vice president last year, he said, "I stand for law and order, stability, and socialism." So too do other members of the committee, KGB Chairman Vladimir Khrushchev and Interior Minister Boris Pugo, the nation's top cop. We do not know why Pavlov and perhaps Yazov are out. Faced with unexpected defiance, they may have had second thoughts. The institutions they represent remain committed to survival. Jonathan Sanders, CBS News, Moscow.
CBS newsman Jim Stewart is standing by now at the Pentagon with a report that the Soviet military machine is far from the solid apparatus that it appeared to be when this all started. Jim?
Dan, all day long, U.S. intelligence analysts have been following reports that there are indeed serious cracks in the Soviet armed forces. They say that entire small units and elements of other units in Moscow and the countryside have switched sides and, in fact, gone over to Boris Yeltsin. Senior administration officials now confirm that we have 3 regular Army divisions and 1 interior division, that'd be about 35,000 men, in Moscow, and that elements from 2 of those divisions have, in fact, switched sides. These analysts also say they believe that the real hidden tiger in the tank of this coup may be a little-known 3-star general named Boris Gromov. He's the number 2 man in the Interior Department. He may be leading, in fact, the tank troops that are now in Moscow. He's a war hero from Afghanistan, a very charismatic leader, we're told. The bottom line, though, these analysts say, is that they've been very surprised at how slow this coup is unfolded and that it, in fact, is far from over and absolutely not a fait accompli. Dan?
Jim Stewart, thanks. Inside the Soviet Union, opposition to the coup makers is not limited to Moscow. Leaders in the vital breadbasket Ukraine declared orders of the new Kremlin rulers null and void. There was a huge demonstration in the Moldavian capital. And Leningrad, the nation's second-largest city, appears firmly in the opposition to the coup camp. Some 200,000 protesters there rallied to back Yeltsin. Leningrad's reformist mayor is a key Yeltsin supporter. But in the would-be breakaway Baltic states, the Soviet military is calling the shots. CBS News correspondent Peter Van Sant made it into Estonia today. He spent several hours there before Soviet authorities kicked him out.
Tanks rumbled into the Estonian capital of Tallinn today in a brute show of force against the democratically elected government. On the streets, shocked Estonians, some looking lost and bewildered, watched the tanks knowing there was nothing they could do to stop them. This is awful. I worry about my children, this woman says. What is to become of us? Thousands of Estonians poured into the streets, demonstrating for their government and against the coup which toppled Mikhail Gorbachev. At Tallinn's airport, crack paratroopers landed and then moved into positions on the outskirts of town. Witnesses say fear is everywhere as Estonians wait for the military to strike.
There are people who feel that there will be blood and there will be people who will stand up eventually.
We saw some people crying, not very many, but some we noticed were crying. They were, what we call in English, they were stoned in their face.
In the harbor, warships were on patrol. In the parliament, politicians openly prayed for their homeland. Our people will continue to struggle for democracy, says the Estonian president. Independent Estonian news tonight reported on the army movement, but there is concern this may be the final newscast. Many of these tanks tonight are reportedly moving toward the television station. Estonians, expecting some kind of assault, have ringed the TV station with trucks in a last-ditched attempt to protect this precious source of information. Armed members of the Estonian Guard are reportedly at the television complex, but it is not known whether they will fire at Soviet troops. And we have also been told that hundreds of Estonians have locked arms, creating a human shield around the television station. And Dan, rumors are running wild that the Army will try to take the building overnight.
Will the Estonians fire back at Soviet troops if they try to do that?
I don't think so. The Baltic states throughout this crisis have always tried to deal from the point of law. They say that they were annexed illegally, and they have tried to use law to regain their independence. If they start shooting at Soviet troops, they would lose some sympathy, they'd lose world sympathy, and also they would set themselves up for a major crackdown and undoubtedly the arrest of all of their leaders.
Peter Van Sant, live. Thanks. He got into Estonia. Still ahead on the CBS Evening News. More coverage and analysis of the crisis in the Soviet Union, including what President Bush did and did not do today.
Years ago, I started running and eating breakfast with grape nut cereal. It's a good way to get complex carbohydrates. Since then, I've found there's so much more to it. It's helped keep me going through hundreds of mornings. That hearty taste. And there's no fat in grape nuts. It's just this natural energy source that keeps coming through for me. That's why it's the one I'll always keep going with. Try it. You'll see.
Breakfast with Post Grape Nuts helps keep you going strong all morning long.
When sore muscles or minor arthritis pain hold you back, you need strong medicine. Ben Gay with not just one, but 2 pain relievers. Warming power for fast relief. Helps get you going again. Ben Gay. Fast, strong medicine for pain relief.
If you don't get to sleep, I won't get to sleep.
Nitol safely helps you fall asleep fast, so you can get your Z's. Nitol or maximum strength Nitol.
Nitol will help you get your Z's.
President Bush appeared in the White House Rose Garden today, spoke, then went back to his vacation home in Maine. Our White House correspondent Susan Spencer is there. Susan?
Dan, President Bush, like everybody else, has been unable to reach Mikhail Gorbachev, but he has now spoken to Boris Yeltsin, who told him that at that very moment, tanks were massing, and who asked for another public declaration of support for Gorbachev. It came within an hour.
And I told him that we respect you. You've been duly elected here. We pray for you, and we hope that you're successful.
Some resistance leaders reportedly were deeply disappointed by Mr. Bush's initial statements. Not only was he more emphatic today, he added again, the coup may well fail.
President Yeltsin told me that he anticipated he thought there were 100,000 people near his building. So you don't take freedom away from people very easily. You don't set back democracy very easily.
Other Western leaders joined the verbal condemnation. British Prime Minister Major seemed shaken after his talk with Yeltsin.
He said to me that he believed he had not very much time left.
To get a clearer fix on things, U.S. Ambassador Robert Strauss, sworn in just this morning, is off on a fact-finding mission. He will not, however, present his credentials.
We're making very clear to the coup plotters and the coup people that there will not be normal relations with the United States as long as this illegal coup remains in effect.
Mr. Bush hasn't decided yet how the U.S. will retaliate economically, but today he ridiculed the idea that the new leaders can long survive without Western aid. Then, declaring he wouldn't stay in Washington just for show, the president returned to Kennebunkport, warning reporters this is now a working vacation. So, just as last August, George Bush is facing an enormous foreign policy crisis. But unlike events in the Persian Gulf, managed so efficiently with American tanks and guns, this time there is frustratingly little that he can really do about it. Dan?
Thanks, Susan. Boris Yeltsin has sent Russia's foreign minister abroad to drum up support. Today, Andrei Kozyrov was in Paris meeting the French foreign minister. Tomorrow, the Yeltsin aide flies here to the United States with a message for President Bush. Foreign Minister Kozyrov joins us live tonight in our CBS News Paris office. Mr. Minister, thank you for being with us. Specifically, what is it that you want President Bush and the American people to do to help Boris Yeltsin and his movement?
Thank you. It's no time for appeasement. We want the West to condemn the coup d'etat, and we want the West to show solidarity with the Russian Federation's government headed by
freely and fairly elected President Boris Yeltsin, and whatever means could be used to stop the bloodshed both in Moscow, in Russia, and in Baltic states.
What about the argument, Mr. Minister, that the Chinese cracked down in Tiananmen Square, that the United States raised some rhetorical protest but didn't do anything, and I hear some of those who support the coup say the same thing will happen in the Soviet Union?
Well, this will be a great pity, as a matter of fact, because the Soviet Union is not China, and this inevitably, the crackdown, if successful, will inevitably roll back the whole story of the Cold War, want or not. And it will be an illusion to think that if the crackdown is successful inside, the Soviet Union can be any participant in any new world international order. It is not the case, because this is the old gods of the totalitarianism, the military industrial complex, the dark side of the military, the reactionary side of the military industrial complex, and they will claim back their status as a military superpower menacing and threatening the world. So let us be clear that at stake not only lives of innocent people, there are lives of true Democrats like Boris Yeltsin and his team. I left just this morning. I was there in the White House yesterday, whole day and whole night.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. We're losing our satellite, and I do apologize, but we had very poor quality on the satellite. Thank you for joining us. Now let's bring in for analysis our CBS News consultant, Professor Stephen Cohen of Princeton. Steve, thanks for being with us tonight. What do we make of these three sudden resignations after, quote, illnesses of leaders of the original coup?
Either the coalition that sent the tanks in the streets is crumbling on the rocks of indecision or resistance, and thus the coup itself is crumbling, or other men, stronger men, standing in the shadows, sent those tanks into the streets, and they've decided that they'll take over now and show real muscle.
We have new videotape, fresh videotape in from Moscow, so let's talk over that, if you will. These scenes, they continue to be incredible scenes. The APCs try to break through the barricades put up to protect Yeltsin, but the citizens eventually stop these APCs. How much longer can this go on, or as Alexander Yakovlev was quoted at CBS News as saying, are these the very decisive hours?
What we're watching, of course, is the classic tragic confrontation between tank politics and the politics of an idea, the idea being democracy. We know as we look at these scenes that enough tanks could be sent to crush that barricade, crush those people, crush that parliament, and crush democracy. It could be done. Whether it will be done or not remains some sort of political issue. Somewhere a battle over the fate of this coup is being fought out, reflected in these resignations today.
We have only a few seconds left. But in terms of strategy, what does Boris Yeltsin have at his disposal? What are his problems?
He needs to communicate with his own people. It's not clear how much he's heard throughout the country. At the moment, he's communicating through shortwave radios, Western broadcast, sending his statements back to the Soviet Union through shortwave radios, and, as you were told by his people today, through fax machines.
As Yeltsin tries to get Gorbachev back in power. Coming up next, how the Soviet crisis could affect American pocketbooks. So stay here with us.
Now you can ask Angela Lansbury about Bufferin.
Angela, you said on TV that Bufferin's effective pain relief. Is it really strong aspirin?
I'll say it is. Extra strength Bufferin's the strongest dose of aspirin you can buy. 1,000 milligrams.
Angela, how can Bufferin be so strong if it has buffers?
That's a good question. I've learned the buffers don't weaken it. They just help prevent aspirin's stomach upset. Bufferin's great pain relief.
Shouldn't you discover the strength of Bufferin?
When you want to bring out real taste, bring out the Hellmann's Real Mayonnaise.
Bring out the grins. Bring out the eyes. Bring out the smiling faces. Bring out the haze. Bring out the praise for the one best mayonnaise. Bring out the Hellmann's. Bring out the best.
Hellmann's Real Mayonnaise.
You've just poured yourself a bowl of Kellogg's Crispix when...
Hello? Mom, what a surprise.
cereal sitting in milk.
When will you get back to your Kellogg's Crispix? It's anybody's guess.
Uh-huh. But they wouldn't give your money back?
Fortunately, Kellogg's Crispix stays crisp and delicious in milk.
Sure, Aunt Helen didn't mean it that way.
Even if you can't get to it right away.
Uh-huh. Still crispy. You're absolutely right, Mom.
Kellogg's Crispix, the taste that waits for you.
Bounced back today, recovering some of yesterday's big losses while investors are getting over the shock of the Kremlin coup. They're not ready to do business inside the Soviet Union. Business correspondent Ray Brady reports.
Moscow's Taste of the West created new customers for U.S. companies, from perfume to pizza to rocking to bands from the USA. But now, companies planning to enter the Soviet market are having second thoughts.
Yesterday, we were about to finalize a joint venture of about $10 million in terms of commitment in the healthcare field. That has been put on hold.
The U.S. does a $1 billion plus business selling grain to the USSR. But yesterday in New Orleans, loading stopped on this Soviet grain carrier. U.S. oil companies plan to invest up to $5 billion in these oil fields, the world's largest oil producers. But there's a new worry. With energy supplies already down due to the Gulf War, any strike or disruption here would send shivers and higher prices around the globe.
If we see those supplies lost, we're going to have two choices. Either pay a higher price to allocate supply, or go hat in hand to Baghdad and ask Mr. Hussein to start producing oil again.
The biggest question mark about the events in the USSR, however, may be their effect on the American consumer. When Americans get worried, they tend to cut back on spending, and that could be bad news in this economy.
If consumer confidence is badly affected by these events, you'd see a slowdown in consumer spending. You could see the economy come back to a recessionary phase.
Investors and others felt the end of the Cold War would bring a period of peace and worldwide boom. But those tanks rolling on Moscow streets yesterday may have crushed a dream that seemed to be turning into reality. Ray Brady, CBS News, New York.
For the 50 million Americans who smoke, another reminder tonight of the health risk. Researchers report that lung cancer has now surpassed heart disease as the leading cause of death among smokers. Now, here's a look at some other stories CBS News is following. In Wichita, Kansas, anti-abortion protesters stormed barricades and scaled fences at an abortion clinic in what's described as their most aggressive demonstration so far. More than 100 were arrested. Federal Judge Patrick Kelly ordered the arrest of 5 protest leaders on contempt charges. In St. Paul, Minnesota, Walter Moody was sentenced to 7 life sentences plus 400 years in prison for the mail bomb deaths of a U.S. federal judge in Alabama and a civil rights lawyer in Georgia. And in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, the cleanup after Hurricane Bob. Damage in Massachusetts alone may reach $1 billion. The hurricane claimed at least 13 lives in its rampage through the Northeast.
Feels to me always like someone's banging on my knuckles with a...
Traveling are Soviet troops on the move. Latest details and analysis of the crisis in the Kremlin. A CBS News special tonight.
Updating the Soviet story, which has been changing while we've been on the air. In the standoff between troops of the coup makers and the would-be coup breakers loyal to Russian President Boris Yeltsin, the scenes are eerily like those in Tiananmen Square in China a few years ago. Soviet armored vehicles making their first move in the darkness against people manning barricades around Yeltsin's Russian parliament. There was gunfire. Anthony Mason, CBS News, reports the first known bloodshed in Moscow. 3 people killed at least 12 wounded, reportedly by a Soviet tank crew. Some of the victims reportedly had stopped the tank and tried to climb inside it. CBS News will be covering and analyzing developments inside the Soviet Union throughout the evening. We'll be back on the air immediately with any major changes. And please note, we'll have a special program right after your late local news, 11:30.